Hey everybody, it's design time with James and Kory.
Hey everybody.
There he is. Uh, we're gonna let's jump right in. I've got questions for you, sir.
All right, Quest.
Um, Now this is all hypothetical. Would you?
Correct. Did I get that one right?
Yeah, you're one for one.
Awesome.
Uh, I
As
want
good
to
as it's
talk.
gonna get.
Yeah, this is. I want to talk about a hypothetical adventure game idea, computer based.
Okay. Okay.
It's really kind of an abstract conversation that I want to have. Kind of ties into this ongoing conversation that we are always having about what what are the essential qualities of an adventure game, what would make a good adventure game, things like of that nature. Um, so I just have been thinking about, in particular, the idea of a user-generated adventure game or a kind of evolving adventure game, right?
Okay. User generated slash evolving. Okay.
Yeah. But in particular, um, you know how I like this structure we've been talking about of kind of a strategy game structure of where you sort of have encounters, and this might be like FTL, the video game, but it could also be Tales of the Arabian Nights board game. Could even be Puzzle Quest, but it doesn't have the kind of randomly generated structure that I would like in the over game, right? It's just a designed thing. But the structure of you've got these individual encounters that are like little games or something like that, or little in Tales of the Arabian Nights. It's hardly a game. It's a paragraph, and you make one or two mild decisions in there, right?
Okay.
And so what I'm interested in, let's start with that. Uh, a system where, like, say, a paragraph game, where the individual encounters are created by people, by the players, like, or even like my Paradigm game is one of the things that got me interested in thinking about this, because that was my most successful. I mean, it was just a play test, but of sort of user-generated content,
Hmm.
So, um, I got a hand wave a whole bunch of magical stuff that has to happen, right? Like,
Okay.
let's just assume that there are ways. So, say it's like Tales of the Arabian Nights, and so you can go onto the system if you want to be a creator, and you create just one individual paragraph, and the way that little scenario is going to play out, and that goes into the system. And let's say there are ways that gets gradually it gets checked for uh, lewd content, and it also gets checked for like how good it is ultimately. Like eventually the good ones bubble up and the bad ones get filtered out, and that's a whole game that people play. Is like, oh, how many hits am I going to get on my little paragraphs that I created this week, right?
Hmm.
Um, but the idea is that the system combines all these pieces into an instance of the game, right? Like, so no player is designing a big adventure; they're just designing one little event that would happen, and so the system like creates a map full of stuff that a bunch of different content creators have made, you know, and sort of algorithmically create some sort of a cohesive game experience there. Total hand waving, right? Um, but
Okay. Depending.
you get the
Depending on
general.
how random or not random you want it. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So starting with that kind of a system, what I'm interested in from you, what I'm interested for you to completely design and finish in an hour,
No
uh,
trouble. Okay.
is uh, what that overall structure should. What do you think? what do you think the bare minimum is that a game like this would need to be compelling at all? Like, and I'm talking about so the structure that's not created by the individual users, right? Sort of
Hmm.
the structure that the system is going to create, or just in general, like, what kinds of things do you want to be doing in this game as a player that would make it interesting to you? Like, you know what I'm saying? Um, if we so we can start with a like a really bare bones Tales of the Arabian Nights kind of thing, which I'm guessing wouldn't be enough for you, or wouldn't be, like basically you just got paragraphs with some multiple choice. Here's here's a little scenario. You can choose to do 5 different things or whatever, and then it gives you some result. Um, that right there isn't actually even good enough, because what does that result mean? If that result, let's say this is a really abstract baseline, the result is just some text, right? So it doesn't even save any state. That's not good enough. Um, uh, so what is good enough? What kind of elements does the system need?
And do you want to know about me personally as a player,
Well, yeah,
or do you want me to answer for everyone?
as my co-designer.
Uh, so, okay. So a few things come to mind.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can spray them all out. Um, did you ever play Adventure Construction Set?
Yeah.
Adventure Construction Kit, maybe. One or the other, kit or set,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And it had a feature that you could say, give me a random adventure, and it would create
Yeah.
this random map, and then you could like step out, you could open any individual, whatever, building, dungeon, whatever the hell they were, I don't remember. And it would be random in there, and the whole thing was nonsensical.
Totally. Yeah.
Totally. And was it very compelling? No,
No.
not to me anyway. It was in this sort of bizarre way for like the first time, just as a sort
Yeah.
of spectacle, right?
But so
And then after
okay.
that, it was like useless, right? So, um,
Right, but
so he,
okay, continue.
no, it's just yeah, okay. So that's one thing that occurs to me. That's why I ask. It depends on how random or not random.
Yeah.
You can get if you can get the things. So here's one thing. That's one thing. A
Yeah.
second thing that occurs to me is that the paragraph style, and of course you could have whatever, right? You could
Yeah.
substitute any other type of encounter creation,
That's what I'm.
and
Yeah.
and immediately there are other encounter types that would appeal to me much more, like puzzles. So if
Mm.
any individual in fact, I did some. I did give some thought to this. I don't know, a long time ago, but I hadn't considered individual contributors making puzzles that then the system would put together. I was thinking
Yeah.
more an individual contributor would design a series of puzzles, right?
Right.
And then they would get vetted through likes or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but
I
in
like.
either case,
Yeah.
individual puzzles as encounters to me is interesting.
Okay.
Um,
Well, so yeah. Um, that's that's a cool direction. Um, uh, but that becomes pretty abstract. I mean, I obviously, I
it
mean,
can.
I like Puzzle Quest and stuff, but it's like the actual puzzles. That's not adventure-y. It's like those are symbolic in some way of of struggle or a battle.
Uh, yes, depending on the types of puzzles, right? So, I mean, I'm imagining at this point that you would leave the type of puzzle open, like you'd be able to, as a contributor, make any sort of puzzle. You'd have some sort of, this is the answer, right?
Right.
Uh, but there are, for example, there are a couple of books that are adventure tales that are sets of puzzles.
Yeah, yeah, I gotcha.
And the puzzles follow along the story. So that's in both of those cases, though, whether you have some sort of maybe in any case, no matter what an individual encounter looks like,
Uh-huh.
how they are, make any kind of sense when strung together in whatever fashion that the overgame does.
Yeah,
Uh, uh, that's like a big question mark for me. Um, and there might be ways to do it algorithmically, right? If you were doing
yeah,
paragraph games, you might be able to find common terms between paragraphs, right? Assuming you eventually end up with whatever, tens of thousands of paragraphs.
yep,
You might go, you might start with a random one, and then your next one, oh, maybe, they both have the word, chimera in them, so they can,
right.
it'll tie those together, some whatever. Um, but over overarching, I don't I don't know. I don't know what's sufficient, um, because the third thing that occurs to me that is sort of an in-betweener is if each encounter is not an encounter, but each encounter is a quest, so that
Okay,
it's not resolved, right?
yeah,
Immediately. So
right.
maybe people are writing paragraphs, but that paragraph is a description of whatever, a little girl crying because she lost her pet chimera and wants you to go find it, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, so okay, so
if because those I think could fit together. If you've got two or three of those at a time, or whatever, however many of those at a time on some sort of map or whatever, uh, then it might naturally feel less piecemeal. It
right.
might.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, this is yeah. So let me flesh that out a little bit, because uh, I don't like just the idea of a paragraph game. So what yeah, let's imagine something more in the middle, where you have so there's sort of like the strict so there's there's just paragraph text, and that is like the equivalent of art. I mean, technically that's all flavor, right? And then somebody can write it, and maybe there is actual art as well. I don't know how that works either. Um,
Right.
but then when you go to so as a designer, you go design a paragraph, and on the back end, like behind all that, there's actual structure. Like, so for instance, like maybe there's an object, like there's a whole tree of objects. So like in this paragraph, for instance, you might have like it involves a ring of invisibility or something. So that's either something that you just made up if it didn't exist in the system already, or it already exists and you use it. You just like so on the back end kind of abstract structure, you're like, well, if they choose this thing, then they will gain a ring of invisibility or whatever. Or if they have the ring of invisibility, and so you don't need, so if you're creating a single paragraph, and you could just say that if they have the ring of invisibility and they choose hide, then this thing happens, whatever. And you're leaving it up. You're just assuming they can find that, like, right? You don't have to give the ring of invisibility to them in this paragraph. You just say if they have it or not. And so then that's what the system does, is it looks at all these things and it says, okay, this paragraph, that's one of the results. So somewhere on this map I need to put a ring of invisibility. I need to include a paragraph that gives you that.
Mm.
And then there could be all sorts of levels where like a paragraph might just specify a treasure. That's a higher level category that so it could incorporate. So if the person has a treasure, they can give it to get this result, whatever. And so that's still the hand wavy magic thing of like writing algorithms to do all that stuff. What I'm interested more in, like, that structure. So the paragraph is the window dressing of like the text that people write. What I'm more asking is like what do you want to actually do as an adventurer? Um, you were already hinting at it. You're saying you want to go on quests. You want things that last for multiple turns, right? You want to encounter
Right.
something uh, and uh, and have something happen that you continue to think about over the successive turns, right? And so you have
Yeah.
a goal that you're trying to meet. Um, okay, so what do you think about? Well, like so, thinking about combat in particular, like so in Tales of the Arabian Nights, combat it's kind of interesting. I mean, it's just another thing that you do, right? It's just like you just fight. Um, uh, and so I'm just thinking about like the basic thing that you do in this game is like choosing between verbs or some kind of like that paragraphy kind of multiple choice thing. Is that ever going to be compelling to you, or um,
Uh, um, it might be okay.
right?
I don't know if it's ever going to feel great to
Right.
me. Uh,
Like an alternative version of this game is where like the mechanics are a lot more fleshed out, and it's like okay, you have characters on a hex grid or a square grid, and there are monsters here, and like so people have created a board basically. Like that scenario is people create some monsters with some stats or whatever, you know. Um, uh, you know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
that's a much more mechanic-y view, and it's kind of easier to get a handle on how that would work. But it's also less interesting to me. I mean, it's less obvious that you would want to do that you could do this user-generated evolving game that way. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
that would be more like, oh, let's make a game like Rogue where people can go design their own monsters, right? Like
Mhm.
this whole community of people is designing a new monster to add to this roguelike game, and then they all get thrown into the mix. I'm actually kind of interested in that, and maybe people have done something like that. But that's
There are some examples out there that have some similarities to what you're talking about.
yeah. Um, but so
Oh, I think I'm losing you.
that's about further. Are you
There you
back?
are.
So that's a bit further in that direction that I want to go. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm sort of in that middle space of like a paragraph game, you know, something where you can't automatically you can't user generate. I mean, you can't algorithmically generate good paragraphs like actual text, right? Um, and so so that's a reasonable thing to want, like a bubble of bubbling new creation of. Um, but I just think that like
Well, I don't know. I have a concern,
yeah, okay,
right? If you are talking about paragraphs, um, I just wonder. So on like card games, do you ever play like any of the collectible card games, Magic the Gathering or something like
sure,
that? And those have a paragraph of flavor
yeah,
text on them.
yep.
Somebody reads those, but most people don't, I don't think. I mean, at least not, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it makes me sort of wary of this danger that you've got this uh, lovely, you know, well-written paragraph, and then there's some sort of mechanical thing going on there, right? If you're talking about the ring of
Yeah.
invisibility or something, right? There's some little choice thing that you make, and is it really, you know, integrated with that text, or are people just going to go, okay, I need this
Yeah.
decision. You
Yeah.
see what I'm saying? And maybe that's fine if some people want to play one way and some people want, you know, want to enjoy the prose. Um, maybe that's okay. But
Well,
I don't.
so in that particular vision of it, I think the idea would be that although there's the mechanics behind it, the text is all you have to glean what that's what tells you what you think you will gain or lose from these different choices that you have to make. So you would read it functionally. So that's so Tales of the Arabian Nights. I mean that's kind of what it's like, but it's really light, right? There's just not
Yeah.
much you can glean. Um, so that would be part of the idea here is that because um, it's because you've got this computer, so you can put algorithms behind that stuff, um, and then if it really was this evolving system that people were contributing to, um, you would start, you would get to know things like like standards would arise, and I don't know, like I said, pretty hand wavy.
Well,
But
I'm just so what is the value that the concealing the mechanics in that paragraph? What does that add?
right.
I
Um,
mean, is it actually more desirable, or is it going to be frustrating to people? So we've both played Tales of the Arabian Nights. Do you ever feel frustrated that you really don't have any idea? And sometimes you're like, oh yeah, this is the choice, obvious choice or whatever. I've played sometimes where I just, you know, I did something maybe uncharacteristic on purpose just to see what would happen.
yeah.
Uh,
It's
I guess the question there is what happens if you play that system without all the nice pros.
Yeah, I mean, Tales of the Arabian Nights doesn't hold together at all, I don't think. So, I mean, it brings up a interest. Those are interesting questions of like, why do I like that game? You know, um, yeah, because I mean, it's like essentially if you played Tales, but you knew what the results would all be, right? Is that like mechanically before you chose them? Is that the question we're asking?
Uh, eh, well, kind of. I mean, Tails to me feels like it's rooted
Did I lose you?
more of those than I've played Tails. No, well, I'm here, but you're there. You are better.
Yeah, we kind of cut
Uh
out
oh.
there.
Yeah, I can see. I got a warning. All right,
Well,
there
what
we
kind
go.
of one?
Connection warning. What I was saying was that in choose your own adventure books, often it's frustrating when you
Yeah, for sure.
choose something that, and then it's the result is nonsensical or it's like what? Why would that happen? This was a better choice because you've such and such.
Right. Well, so this is kind of part of the question I'm asking. Really, is um,
Yeah.
to like because to go again further in that mechanic-y direction, like you could essentially design a game that is that encounter structure. Like I said, like it could be a thing where, uh, yeah, it's like uh, you when you have an encounter, you appear on a map somewhere, and there's a bunch of built-in rules about here's how you've got a movement speed and a turn order, and it's a combat system essentially, like a war gamey combat thing, right? Uh, and you could build that game in such a way, like I think a lot of systems like that wouldn't really support user-generated content much, right? I mean, it would be better just to make a roguelike game or whatever kind of game you would just algorithmically or you would pre-design the scenarios. but you could. So what I'm imagining is, designing a game that's specifically built to be like, well, you really get a lot of juice out of this if somebody sits down and designs each one of those encounters. And it would be great if we had like 100,000 of those encounters, which we could get if users are like in there still making them every week. Um, like,
Right.
does that appeal to you more? It goes back to this is what I mean when I say like what kinds of things do you want to be doing as an adventurer in these games? Like, do you want to be interacting like with a sort of a well established mechanical system uh, that that just has interesting combinations, interesting maps, or whatever? Um, or what are the alternatives?
Well, yeah. So for me, as a player, what I really want to do is two things.
Yeah.
I want to find stuff,
Okay.
right? And I want to solve puzzles with particular qualities.
Okay. Wait. But what
Yeah,
of certain qualities? What?
of yes, of particular qualities. So because here's what I really find frustrating in say traditional point and click adventure games,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
Traditional point and click adventure games have okay, if we compare those to what you're talking about, instead of a paragraph, you've got a scene, right? And you have various things you can
Yeah.
click on, and they're sort of like
Uh-oh. You cut out again. I hope we don't lose James because we're getting to the stuff I'm interested in. Hmm.
hmm.
Are you back?
Yes.
Huh. Okay. Now. Oh, are you back again?
I am here. Are you
Okay.
there?
I'm here. Uh, I was saying
Mission control.
I hope we don't lose you because
Uh,
we're
uh,
just getting to the stuff, the good stuff here. Oh, come on. Hmm.
yeah. Mm,
Uh. So
yes. Try again.
let's try again. Um.
Okay.
You want to find stuff and you want to solve puzzles.
Right.
We got a
I want
big
to
delay.
solve puzzles. I said, oh, do we?
Yeah, that's okay. Keep talking.
All right. So I said I want to solve puzzles with particular qualities, but really I want to solve puzzles that don't have particular qualities. I don't want to solve puzzles that are of the nature of guess what the puzzle designer was thinking.
Yeah.
That I find very frustrating. I think some people really like those. So you get those in point and click adventures. You get those in interactive fiction, right?
Yeah.
Um, you get those in like Myst,
Yep.
that style of puzzle game, and so those will be okay. This puzzle's fun. This puzzle's fun. Then I get to one and I'm like, no, this doesn't make any sense, you know. Uh, so I find those frustrating, and that's what I wonder about. Um, to me, that has some similarity to um, Tails.
Yeah, I see
You
what you
know,
mean.
there's some of, just guess what the paragraph designer was thinking.
Yeah,
In Tails, I can sort of just kind of go along for the ride and make
yeah.
an arbitrary decision, and not, if it turns out like totally unexpected, then I don't worry about it so much. So maybe it's not a huge concern. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, it, I'm thinking. So on the one hand, when you say you want to find things and you want to solve certain kinds of puzzles, um, that uh, it sparks. I mean, it kind of plays into this this thought. The what I'm interested in, which is that content, um, like interesting puzzles are well, they're hard to algorithmically generate. Well, it's hard to you can't. We don't know how to algorithmically generate ideas for whole types of puzzles, right? Like if we have if we've decided if we've already designed a certain type of puzzle, like a match three puzzle or something like that, then or a sliding block puzzle or something, then
Right.
we can algorithmically generate those. But it's still so I just have this idea of like something that's more organic and kind of more adventure-y feeling to me. I'm like, oh, if you could have, people could keep coming up with creative things, creative situations, creative situations for you to find things and solve puzzles in. But yeah, you're right. The danger there is that that just opens the door to guess what the puzzle designer was thinking problems. Um,
Well, yes, but if those are, vetted with the like system or whatever like
yeah,
that, you know, by the players or other designers or whoever, uh, maybe that would become less of an issue.
yeah. But okay,
If you had the game Mist, and nowadays, actually there was an online version, but if you had an online version, and the players as they played those puzzles were rating those puzzles, right?
sure, yeah,
Then if enough people were frustrated with a puzzle because they couldn't guess what the designer was thinking, those
yeah,
sink to the bottom. They don't
right,
get used by the algorithm.
right. So okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. But so Myst is a very adventure like is an adventure game with very few elements of strategy, right? It's not a strategy game basically, right? And so I'm more interested in sort of the more of a strategy
Right.
so I'm just like so in a game where you find things and solve puzzles, it's like well, I kind of like I want to do something with the things I find. Like if I find a ring of invisibility, I want that thing to do something in the game, Like I want it to actually make me invisible. You know what I mean? Like so how
Right. So if you find a ring of invisibility, you expect that to, at least I would hope, that it is possibly part of a solution, or possibly part of, at least you could, something that you can try in each of the encounters after you found it.
right. So does that I mean yeah. That I'm trying to picture how that. Yeah, now it's really magical, and I mean, I'm having trouble picturing even what the structure of those puzzles would
Yeah.
be, right? Um,
Hmm.
uh, but I see the point. Huh. Uh,
Yeah, huh?
yeah. So that yeah. So I feel like there's still a question I haven't. This has been somewhat unfocused because I don't quite know what I'm asking. Um, but so
Okay.
are you not as interested in? Are you like me, not so interested in a game with a very well-defined like battle system or something? Like fundamentally, the encounters are like moving chess pieces around on a or whatever. I mean, but you like
I'm less and less interested in those types of games. I think that's already been done anyway.
right. Well, I mean,
Right.
yeah, right, yeah. I mean, so you like D&D fourth edition, and like
Hmm.
a lot of the core mechanics there are this wargamey kind of battle system, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
Tactical combat. Yes.
yeah. So maybe part of the question I'm asking is what can we do besides that? Um, in an what can you do in a kind of strategy slash adventure game of the type that I'm kind of talking about? You know, that
Hmm.
isn't like I understand why.
Hmm.
If it's not
So, yeah.
if it's not like moving pieces around like a chess game, there's Rogue or even there's Match Three. Like I understand the reason to design like a really like a set of abstract mechanics that are kind of physical that have to do with things moving around and affecting each other in some way, on a grid or whatever, because you get all sorts of juice out of that, right?
Right.
All
Yep.
sorts of game-like mechanical juice.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, I'm just wondering if so I guess one of my attempts to move away from that is this user-generated thing. It's like to go to something more organic. I don't know how to algorithmically generate that. Uh, so that's part of my interest there, and having a structure where people can create little pieces of that.
Yeah. Um, I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
I can hear you right now.
Eh?
I can hear you.
Okay. So there are things you can do on on a map of squares, moving physical things around that don't have anything to do with combat.
Right. Okay.
It may just be relabeling things that are currently labeled combat. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure, right?
Right. I
But
I
go.
aim my love at
Now I
that.
think there are other things you can do because we've already seen it. We've already seen there are all kinds of puzzles that are physical on a grid of
Yeah,
squares,
sure,
right? There are whole classes of puzzles. Sokoban puzzles, for example. That's a very physical type
sure.
of puzzle on a square grid, right? There are nonograms. There are even things like crosswords and things like that, right?
Yeah,
Um, so those that those some of those other types of things are what I've been exploring recently. I talked to Greg and Brett about them in April, and I might have discussed it with you. The idea of this having a three encounter, exactly three encounters, and each one is a type of physical puzzle, and each player has a person on the board. And in the things you're doing, you're moving, you're picking things up, you're putting things down. Just a limited set of like half a dozen of those types of verbs.
yeah. Okay.
and having a card for each one. Okay, so I do think there is room to explore things beyond just combat in that sort of style. I don't know if it's a style or if it's a
Yeah.
what it is, right? In that space, I think there's still room to explore in that space, and some people have built lots of these whatever, especially if you look at some of the like it'll do on
Yeah.
the right. That includes combat, but it wouldn't necessarily have to. I don't know. You might want some sorts of hazards in any case. But yeah, I hear what you're saying about how, what is the other, like, what's a whole different direction, right? What's a more artistic, analog,
Yeah.
uh, right, kind of experience that could be created
Yeah. I mean, because like
that
if
really needs a human element
yeah, yeah.
to
Well,
create
it's
it,
just
right?
like I mean, I'm not against the idea of, but it's not what I'm currently focused on. The thing is, like, if you have like a Sokoban puzzle base, um,
Hmm.
uh, it's like, well, I mean, I was going to say there's nothing really fundamentally adventure-y about that. I mean, I guess you have a character that's walking around a space pushing
Yep.
blocks, right?
Right.
Um, uh, I just think on this on this higher level, I'm like, what, or I mean, Puzzle Quest is an even better example, where it's like, okay, these are kind of like magical runes that you're matching, but it's like there's nothing adventure-y about that game with the grid. Uh, it's the higher level. Um, I'm like, what are the elements? Uh, Yeah, it's like I want a game where it's like what do you do in adventures? Like you say, yeah, you find things and you solve puzzles. Um,
Yep.
you
And
travel.
normally there's fighting, but I would
Yeah.
just recently, over, maybe I'm just getting old, but I'm just getting less and less interested in fighting. I keep complaining to everybody about it.
Yeah, I mean I, that's the ballpark I'm in. I'm like with fighting, I can imagine it's easy to imagine because we have so many examples of these game mechanics that revolve around fighting and things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's like there's all these things that happen in the text of Tales of the Arabian Nights that like in the text those are so different than things that happen in these mechanic. It's like um, in their sort of analog. It's like because they're so specific, like Sinbad story. It's like there's not any game mechanics that support like, oh, I'm gonna throw this carcass into the Valley of Diamonds so that diamonds will stick to it. I don't know. Maybe there are mechanical things that happen like that in old
Yeah.
World of Warcraft or some online games. Um, yeah, it's like what I'm saying, like it's like I want the experience of like, oh, I fooled that dragon, with a in a certain in some way. Uh, like that doesn't really happen in Rogue, because the game mechanics are too narrow for that.
Tink.
Yeah.
All right. I think you're still there, though.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. See, the last thing I heard you say was maybe there are things like that in World of Warcraft. I wouldn't know because
Right.
I haven't played it. But those, yeah. So in this, type of system that I've been thinking about, you have a game master, right, that
Yeah.
actually creates these elements. but in a very, very structured way. Um, and with, uh, for example, having a solution. So each board, each physical space, each scenario has a way to. It's the game master's responsibility to ensure that there is at least one way to resolve it. But
Okay.
the players would be free to find other solutions, for example.
Right.
So
Uh,
that the game master might have something specific in mind like that, but just through the physical mechanics, they might find other ways
yeah.
that they want to do this. But in terms of uh, uh, what what I mean, it's there's some thread here with Paradigm, but also with like the cartoon one you were
Yes.
making with the two frames and the right. So talk about that. Talk about that thread for a minute. I mean, it sounds like you're. It's in a different direction, but you're still. You're. It seems
Yeah.
like you're searching for this same kind of something. What is that? What the hell are you trying to do?
If we only knew. That's yeah. Well, it's
Just what is it you want to accomplish here?
I mean, those games or those ideas are, and kind of there might be two separate questions there because there's this the overall the the overall idea with those things. That was my first real experiments with like user generated content, you know, and so that's just all by itself, and that's what I'm really intrigued by is little bits of it, like where um, where like where people are. See, there isn't any really over game structure. There's no higher structure. Although even in Paradigm, yeah, it's like there's no structure on Twitter or whatever, but conversations arise. Like structure arises. Um,
Mm,
but but that's just a particular. So I'm interested in that, like little bits of content that people can create relatively quickly, and then people can consume them, one after the other. But with this
okay.
particular idea, what I'm interested in is adding that over game, like having an algorithmic thing. Because I love FTL and these other, I just have a vision of these games where these little bits get put together into a bigger instance that might last for a few hours or something like that. And so that's what I keep coming back to and figuring out ways um, of pushing on those ideas. I mean, the games that exist, like FTL, the games that exist, they work the way they do. They were designed not to need user-generated content for all their stuff, right?
Right.
So they have a certain structure. So, like in FTL, you could let users design new enemy ships and whatever, new with new little essentially little scenarios, maybe even little AI, little behavior patterns or whatever. It'd be really complicated, like, and it doesn't necessarily fit that game. Like that game doesn't really need it because it's designed in a certain way, and but I'm interested in going in that direction. Like, yeah, what if the game was designed around the idea that the little encounters that you have are more, because that game works really well for me as a strategy game with uh, basically random. I mean, like, within the structure, it just randomly designs a bunch of ships. It just throws them out there on the map, and whatever comes out, it makes a viable game. It's a strategy game, not really an adventure game.
Hmm.
Um, so if you can do that with pieces of just essentially these randomly generated ships within that structure, I'm interested in doing it with pieces of content that were created by a community, um, or like
Yeah.
Settlers of Catan islands. See, again, that's Settlers of Catan is made so that you can pretty much set up any. You don't need a human designer to put together a good island, because you can pretty much put together any island and it'll work. You know.
Yeah.
But one level above that, you could have a game where it really wants a human designer to put together this island, that works as a cool game. And then the whole game is this adventure across, 30 islands that the system served up to you.
Well, mm, so that's a little bit easier to imagine, and
Yeah.
maybe it points at the answer. That direction, if the system actually gives you a set of elements, you the designer as a designer,
Yeah.
if it gives you, it says, okay, here's what you get to play with. You get an invisible ring, and you get
Yeah.
right a chimera and a little girl, and you
Yeah.
get and this island is covered in snow, right? Okay, here you go. Make an adventure out of that. That direction is actually easier for me to imagine than having the players create those individual things or whatever, and
Yeah.
then having a system that puts those together in a way that makes sense.
Right. I mean, that is what I'm imagining. But I'm wondering, like, what does that core system, what elements does that core system need to have? Like, should it be a thing that
Yeah.
happens on a grid? I mean, essentially, this is what I was imagining. I was imagining it not having a grid, something really abstract, like
Hmm.
paragraphs. Essentially just object and room based. Like, yeah, every node of a map or something is a scenario that has flavor text, and essentially you're essentially, so you probably have a character with stats of or qualities that you can gain or
Hmm.
lose as the game goes along, and then objects that you can find or spells that you can acquire. All these things, that you just do stuff with. Uh, but is that good enough? Like, so what? So that is what I want. I want to like create a whole bunch of pieces that people can use to put together
Okay.
uh, into little scenarios that can be that can then fit together into one big instance of a game that you play in a few hours. But what do those pieces need to be?
Uh,
Moving on,
well, so
you know, like if it's
it,
not at the level of moving around on a map, say it like, so if each individual encounter is not, it doesn't have you stepping around on a grid, the sort of paragraph multiple choice kind of thing was where my mind naturally went to, is the higher level, the more abstract thing. And so what else do you do there if it's not one of those two?
if it's not moving around on a map, well, so entails you move around on a map also, right?
Right. I'm
But
saying, we're not, I'm saying, sure, you have movement at the big
but
game.
you're talking about a tactical map,
Yeah.
um, right?
The individual
So
encounter.
right. So in any game, tactical combat game, right, like D&D Fourth Edition or any tactics game, right, you're managing certain resources. Those
Yeah.
resources are labeled attributes on characters, but really you're so actually one thing that's interesting about those games is that the characters act as a container for a group of your resources. So you have you
Yeah.
have you have overall resources. Like within an adventuring party in D&D, you've got X number of hit points amongst all of the characters, right?
Yeah.
Your hit points are a resource, but those are in little groups. They're in little containers, right? I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's interesting anyway.
Yeah. It is.
Uh, um, because that's actually where a lot of the, hey, we need to get this resource, we need to get this ranged resource right over out of the fight so you can actually, get some shots off or whatever.
Yeah, I see.
So I
Right.
guess even more than that, you've got these little containers of resources mixed with verbs,
Yeah.
right? In large part, the verbs available to the different characters in D&D are pretty much the same, but sometimes you encounter verbs, or geez, the verbs there get complex because you have usually a combination of verbs that's happening at the same time. This particular attack does damage and pushes the enemy 2 squares or something like that,
Right.
right? So in any case, that's one thing that makes those games interesting. Tactics games, and I'm thinking whatever Final Fantasy
Yeah.
Tactics, or there are a whole bunch of tactics games, right? Even just the old war games, hex war games, where you're moving stuff around, which is
Yeah, for
where all
sure.
these things come from, right?
Exactly. So if you don't have
So
that, let's say you don't have, that's not
right.
the kind of
So
tactical.
where I was going there, yeah, where I was going there though is what in uh, Tails, you do have other resources. You have these labels that get
Yeah.
attached to your character, I think, are one of your main resources, right? So to me, that's what becomes the question is, and maybe that's what you're asking, is what are interesting resources, or what is an interesting way for those resources to be gained, lost, interact in
Interact.
whatever way
Yeah,
with the
that's
system.
those are the big questions. Yeah, it's like, um, and
And
so
so maybe you're asking me, what are interesting resources to have? Would you like to ask me that?
no, no,
No.
um,
Okay.
no. I do, but even more. That's one I can come up with some answers myself. It's
Sure.
interaction. It's the interactions are more what I'm interested in. Like, um, maybe I do need to hear that other answer first. But it's like, I mean, I can imagine all this. Maybe I'm being too standard, but I mean, I can imagine all like character traits, uh, you know, uh,
Yeah.
and then objects and spells and
Yep.
all these different things. But I still don't. What I'm not picturing is what's the system. Like what decisions are you actually making? How do these things interact with each other? What's the basic system there that that's behind it all.
Yeah. So in every game, right? Whatever your resource is, there's kind of, I think maybe there are two types. Two types that most games fit into. They're either racing, and in racing games you often have resources, but you don't have to, right? You can have a pure racing game like Chutes and Ladders, whatever, where the only thing you've got is your position, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but beyond that, almost all games, I should say. Um, Obviously, there are going to be a few exceptions, but most of them, you've got a set of resources, and you've got a way to add resources, remove resources, modify resources, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's mostly what they boil down to.
Yeah.
Uh, and if you're asking what else is there beyond that,
Well,
then there are a few things beyond
you
that,
know,
but
what I what I'm just I'm uh what I'm interested, I guess, is the way that those things get added or removed or modified, in a way that makes an interesting game. Because so the problem with Tales of the Arabian Nights, or a problem, is that
yeah,
you don't, it's too loose. it's too flat and loose, and you don't know. You're just presented with a paragraph, and you choose a verb, and then you find out what, and you can take some guess at like, well, my character has stealth, so maybe I'll try to sneak, and I have a better chance of success.
Right.
Uh, but
Right.
if what I was my point early on was you could just expose that, and then and just tell you at the beginning of instead of reading the paragraph or whatever, or in addition just say, and here's the things that will result, if the different choices you can make, here's the game results that will happen, and that just exposes how flat that game system is, right? You don't get any
Right.
juice out of it. I mean, you get all sorts of juice when you're on a grid moving units around that interact with each other. It's like, that comes out of chess and other war games. That's what I'm asking, is like, where do we get, how do you get juice out of, I want a game that has ring of invisibility and spells and moving up, finding stuff and solving puzzles, but game mechanics that support I don't know. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, um, so the only thing that really comes to mind there is in some role-playing games, you get rewarded by the other players for doing interesting things.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't know. I haven't. This isn't really guiding me in how this would be implemented in any kind of system that you're talking about, right? But well, okay. Here would be an example that maybe doesn't make sense. I have no idea. So contributors write these paragraphs, and in hopefully some intelligent fashion, the system presents them and will string them together.
Yep.
But the way you, as a player, resolve a paragraph is to write a sentence.
Okay. Yeah.
And that gets shown to 100 people, and they go, that's awesome, or that's stupid, or
Yeah.
whatever. And your results are dependent on that. So maybe you've got resources, whatever, and if people are like jazzed about it, you have a good result. If people
Yeah.
think it's stupid, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I like that idea. It's still not, it's not quite the direction. Well, I mean, it's a very storytelling direction, and
Yeah,
I bet. I mean, I'm interested in that too. We've played these various story
sure.
generating games and
Yep,
stuff.
and it's similar to, like, for example, the cartoon one where you're putting the two things together, or whatever. Why did the chicken? It's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Even apples to apples, if you boil it down that far.
Yeah,
Um,
like that. So yeah, maybe we can start wrapping this up. I think you got to go.
yeah, yeah, yep.
Um, but I guess the thing to try to answer once more, what is it that I want? I want game mechanics, like, so not, moving more away from that storytelling uh, this kind of system, to more game mechanics that it's like, I don't know if what I want can exist. It's like we know we have we have a lot of game mechanic examples of battle systems, and it's like,
Hmm.
what I want is like all these other things that happen in fairy tales and adventure stories, like courage and love and betrayal and things like, but I want this abstract system of game mechanics that involve resources being, that somehow encapsulate that. Uh,
Yeah. It is. I don't know how you do that without trivializing those
right,
things, right?
right.
That's. Okay, I'll give it some thought, but
Yeah.
I really wonder if it does boil down to some other adding a human element on the other end like that,
Yeah.
a judging, especially if you have if you have described for yourself a character, right? And if the judges can look at your character as you've described and the way
Yeah.
you've chosen to resolve a particular paragraph and go, yes, that was in character, no, that was not in character. If you get even more complicated, maybe your character is following some sort of development arc where your character is actually developing, is becoming more courageous, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
that actually sounds fun to me, but
It does to me too.
it's sort of a hot or not, a fiction hot or not, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
But
But I'll think about it some more. Maybe we can talk about it next week.
okay, that's great. Um, Thanks to all our viewers.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
I think we almost finished our complete game design there. So just a little wrap up to do, and
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll publish.
yep, sounds great. We'll try
All
again.
right. All right. We'll see you.
All right.